My rich in-laws stole my kids using their legal connections. Their perfect plan crumbled when their own lawyer confessed. I, 32M, never thought I'd be sharing this story, but after everything that's happened, I need to get it off my chest. 5 years ago, I signed away my rights to my kids during what I can only describe as the darkest period of my life. Today, I'm fighting to get them back, and the person helping me is the last one I expected. My ex-wife's former lawyer. It started when I lost my job at the tech company I'd been with for 8 years. The economy was tanking, and our department got cut. My ex and I were already having problems, but losing my main source of income pushed us over the edge. She started staying out late, saying she needed space to think. I was too caught up in my depression and job hunting to see what was coming. One evening, I came home to find the house empty. No note, no kids, nothing. Just silence and half-empty closets. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely dial her number. When she finally answered, her voice was cold, detached. "We're staying with my parents. I've already talked to a lawyer." The next few months were a blur of panic attacks and desperate attempts to find work while fighting for custody. My unemployment benefits barely covered the rent for my studio apartment, let alone a decent lawyer. Meanwhile, her family had connections, money, and a shark of an attorney who seemed to take personal pleasure in destroying me. During the custody hearings, they painted me as an unstable, unemployed father who couldn't provide for his children. They brought up the time I had to get medication for anxiety after the layoff, twisted it into a narrative about mental instability. Every job rejection, every late bill payment, every moment of despair was weaponized against me. Then came the ultimatum. Her lawyer pulled me aside after another devastating court session. He said they had evidence that would guarantee I'd never see my kids again. He wouldn't show me what it was, but the threat hung in the air like a guillotine. Sign away my rights voluntarily, and I could still have supervised visits. Fight it, and they'd make sure I never saw my children again. I was broken, desperate, and alone. My own lawyer, a public defender who could barely remember my name, advised me to take the deal. "You can always petition for rights later when you're back on your feet," she said, not meeting my eyes. I signed the papers with trembling hands, feeling like I was signing my own death warrant. The moment that pen touched the paper, something inside me died. I got my supervised visits, 2 hours, twice a month, in a sterile room with a court-appointed supervisor watching my every move. My daughter would cry when it was time to leave, and my son stopped calling me dad. For 3 years, I lived like a ghost. I finally found work as a systems administrator at a smaller company, moved to a better apartment, even started therapy. But those supervised visits were killing me slowly. Watching my kids grow up in snapshots, missing every important moment, seeing them become strangers who shared my DNA. Then 2 months ago, I got a call that changed everything. It was her lawyer, well, her former lawyer. He'd left the firm and wanted to meet. I almost didn't go. The thought of facing one of the architects of my destruction made me physically ill. But something in his voice sounded different. What he told me over coffee that day shook me to my core. He'd been going through old cases, preparing to start his own practice, when he found inconsistencies in my file. The evidence they'd threatened me with? Fabricated. The psychological evaluation they'd used against me? Doctored. He had proof, and more importantly, he had a conscience that had finally caught up with him. "I've done things I'm not proud of," he said, pushing a folder across the table. "But this was wrong, and I want to help you make it right." I sat there, staring at the folder, feeling the weight of the past 5 years pressing down on me. After everything I'd been through, could I really trust the man who'd helped take my children away? But as I looked through the documents, one thing became crystal clear. This might be my only chance to get my kids back. That was 8 weeks ago. Now I'm in the fight of my life, and the man who once helped destroy me is leading the charge to restore my rights. The initial hearing is tomorrow morning. The hearing was a disaster. My ex-wife's new lawyer came prepared with a stack of photos showing me missing 2 supervised visits last year, when I was in the hospital with pneumonia. They twisted it into a pattern of continued unreliability. I sat there, gripping the edge of my chair, watching them try to bury me all over again. But then something unexpected happened. Her former lawyer, now my advocate, stood up and calmly presented the evidence of manipulation in my original case. The judge's expression changed as she reviewed the documents. The psychological evaluation had clear signs of tampering. The threatening emails they claimed I sent? The metadata showed they were created after I'd supposedly sent them. My ex-wife's face went pale when her former lawyer started talking about the firm's internal communications regarding my case. Turns out, They'd known I was actively job hunting and had interviews lined up when they painted me as willfully unemployed. They deliberately scheduled court dates to conflict with my interviews, then used my absences against me. The judge called a recess, and that's when all hell broke loose. In the hallway, my ex's father, a man I once respected, tried to offer me money to drop everything and walk away. "Name your price," he said, like we were negotiating a business deal instead of my children's future. His face was red, that vein in his forehead pulsing like it used to when he'd lecture me about real men providing for their families. I wish I could say I maintained my composure, but 5 years of pain came boiling out. I told him exactly where he could shove his money. Security had to separate us. Not my proudest moment, but watching him sputter and back away gave me a satisfaction I'm not ashamed to admit. The judge ordered a full investigation into the original custody proceedings. My ex-wife's new lawyer tried to argue that regardless of past misconduct, the current arrangement was stable for the kids. That's when my lawyer dropped another bomb. He had evidence that my ex had been coaching the kids before our supervised visits, threatening to take away their phones and privileges if they showed too much affection toward me. The supervisor from our visits stepped forward to confirm it. She'd reported concerns multiple times about the kids' behavior, how they'd arrive excited to see me but act reserved after receiving text from their mother. All these reports had somehow never made it to the original court files. My son is 13 now, old enough for the judge to consider his opinions. When they interviewed him in chambers, he finally told someone what I'd suspected for years. His mom and grandfather had convinced him that if he showed too much love for me, it would hurt his mother, maybe even make her sick like before. A manipulation tactic they'd used, playing on his memories of her postpartum depression. Each revelation felt like a weight lifting off my chest, but also like a knife twisting deeper. These were years I couldn't get back. Birthday parties missed. School plays watched through photos on social media. My daughter's first lost tooth. My son's baseball games. All stolen by a lie crafted to punish me for failing to meet their expectations. The investigation has been going on for 3 weeks now. More evidence keeps surfacing. Other cases from the same law firm are being reviewed. My ex-wife's father's influence went deeper than anyone realized. He'd had connections with the court-appointed psychiatrist who'd labeled me unstable. Yesterday, my ex-wife called me. First time we've spoken directly in years without lawyers present. She was crying, saying she never knew how far her father and the lawyers had gone. Said she'd been scared and angry back then. Had let her dad convince her I would hurt them financially like his father had hurt his family. The firm had assured her everything they did was standard procedure in high-conflict divorces. I wanted to believe her. Part of me still loves the person she used to be, before fear and manipulation poisoned everything. But 5 years of seeing my children treated like weapons against me isn't something I can just forgive because she claims ignorance. The judge is reviewing all the evidence next week. My lawyer thinks we have a solid case for full restoration of my parental rights, maybe even primary custody given the documented manipulation. But I'm not celebrating yet. I've learned the hard way that justice isn't guaranteed, even when truth is on your side. My daughter asked me during our last supervised visit, which I'm still required to attend until the judge makes her final ruling, if she could have a sleepover at my place like her friends do with their dads. I had to tell her we needed to wait for the judge's permission. The look in her eyes haunts me. No child should have to ask permission to love their parent. The judge's final ruling came down yesterday. I've been staring at the documents for hours, still trying to process everything. My parental rights have been fully restored. The court found clear evidence of systematic manipulation and legal malpractice in the original proceedings. But that's just the beginning. My ex-wife's father is facing disbarment for his role in influencing court officials. 3 other lawyers from the firm are under investigation. The psychiatrist who falsified my evaluation has already surrendered his license. It feels surreal, like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. The custody arrangement has been completely restructured. I have my kids 4 days a week now. No supervisors, no sterile visitation rooms, just regular time with my children in my home. The judge also ordered family counseling, all of us, including my ex-wife. It's not perfect, but it's more than I dared hope for just a few months ago. My son was the first to move some of his things into the spare room at my apartment. He brought his gaming console and asked if we could play like we used to, before everything fell apart. We stayed up too late playing racing games, just like when he was 8. He fell asleep on the couch, and I sat there watching him breathe, afraid to move in case this was all a dream. My daughter is taking longer to adjust. Years of being told to be careful around me left their mark. But yesterday, she asked me to help her with her science project, something about building a model volcano. We made a mess with baking soda and vinegar in my kitchen, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of her real smile, not the careful one she's worn during supervised visits. My ex-wife, that's complicated. The investigation revealed she'd been as much a victim of her father's manipulation as I was, though in different ways. The controlling behavior, the financial threats, the emotional manipulation. It went back to her childhood. Doesn't excuse what happened, but it helps explain it. She's in therapy now, working through decades of conditioning. Her father hasn't spoken to any of us since the ruling. Last I heard, he's liquidating assets ahead of the inevitable lawsuits. The law firm is in chaos as more cases are being reviewed. My lawyer, still strange to think of him that way, says this could affect dozens of other families who were put through similar ordeals. The hardest part now is learning to be a full-time parent again. I second-guess every decision, worried about messing up this second chance. Do I help with homework too much? Not enough? Is it okay to have ice cream for dinner once in a while? The regular parent stuff that I used to take for granted now feels like walking through a minefield. But then there are moments that make it all worth it. Like this morning, when I made breakfast for the kids before school. Nothing special, just scrambled eggs and toast. My daughter complained that I'd burned the toast, and my son rolled his eyes at my dad jokes. It was perfectly ordinary. Wonderfully, beautifully ordinary. The supervised visits room at the courthouse is being renovated into a children's advocacy center. My lawyer asked if I'd be willing to share my story to help other parents fighting similar battles. I agreed, but only after the kids are more settled. They've had enough of being in the middle of adult problems. Yesterday, I found an old photo album while unpacking some boxes that had been in storage. There's a 5-year gap in the pictures, a visual representation of everything that was stolen from us. But now we're making new memories. My phone is filling up with photos of ordinary moments. Homework sessions, failed cooking attempts, pillow forts in the living room. I know the road ahead won't be easy. Trust takes longer to rebuild than it does to break. The kids still sometimes tense up when voices are raised, even in excitement. My ex and I are learning to co-parent from scratch, trying to put our children's needs ahead of old hurts. Some days are better than others. But tonight, my daughter fell asleep reading on my couch, and my son is teaching me about his favorite video game. They don't have to watch the clock or wait for a supervisor's permission to hug me goodbye. We're not just making up for lost time. We're building something new, something stronger. To the lawyer who found his conscience, if you're reading this, thank you. To other parents going through similar battles, don't give up. And to my kids, I'm sorry it took so long, but Dad's home now. For good.